Anyway, so as I was saying, what was I saying anyway? I forgot. Uh, War in Ukraine. Oh yeah. So the U.S. They after they blew the NATO the blew off Russia in '91, and that was the stupidest geopolitical mistake because instead of bringing Russia under its wing and incorporating under as part of NATO and expanding European security, including Europe and stuff, they excommunicated Russia away and formed the European Union without Russia in it, which is the biggest country in Europe, which irrational. It promotes division and tension. And anyway, and then they thought, well, it's a gas station, country masquerading as a gas station, as famously known. And then they underestimated sort of Russian ability to stand on its own 2 feet, and Russia was pushed in the arms of China and India, and from that moment on, the BRICS started to develop and whatnot, alternative sort of forms uh, that were and forums that were excluding like the West from it. Yeah, and then they thought, okay, we can do sanctions and we can do this and that, and it will destroy Russia, and it just made it stronger and stronger and stronger. So now they chicken coming home to roost sort of thing. They planned on destroying Russia and capitalize their banks and markets on that, and that didn't work out. So at some point, like in the Second World War, U.S. was sitting on playing on both sides, seeing which way it's gonna go. If it's Germany's gonna win, then gonna go against Russia. If it's Russia's win, Soviets are winning, then I'm going against Germany. So same here. They waited with the globalists running Biden administration and whatnot, and before it was all like globalists all the way through, like Clinton and whatever the Obama and Bushes and all that. They're all like globalists. And at some point, Trump, he was pushed forward by the nationalists, American nationalists, the American elites, who then saw that the globalists are losing, that they're not gonna probably take over the world anymore. China is gone out of control as far as its economic development. Russia is out of their control as far as their economic and military development, and so on. So like they're like realized, okay, it's not going to be unipolar world order as was after Second World War. It's going to be now multipolar world order, and we better secure our geopolitical position, sort of uh, sphere of influence within our scope of sort of American power elite. Mm. That's when became sort of a tensions between the Western globalist camp, so-called neocons and whatnot, liberal Democrats and whatnot, was their like rules-based order and whatnot, and the like Trump administration and like U.S. nationalists who say no, we just want to focus on things that we can actually control and achieve, and not waste our money on pursuing some wet dream that we know is ridiculous or out of our reach. At least they're like realistic. They say, okay, we don't mind controlling the world, but it's not going to happen for a while, so we're going to put on the back burner right now, just focus on things that we can presumably achieve. So, hence, there's kind of divorce between sort of Americans and British and Europeans, who the Americans say, you know what, you British Europeans, you're not going to control the world. you made a bunch of mistakes, and we don't want to be part of that sinking Titanic. So thank you very much. They may start dealing with Russia, made on with outside of Europe, and start directly dealing with Russia, which was expected. And anyway, and they all, as far as the as I said before, there are two teams that are playing their geopolitical game. They're all like what do you call it, Illuminati Masons, whatnot, and but they all have their own sort of sects and factions and whatever. And the those similarities that they share are overwhelming to compared to the differences that disagree over. So like they all have sort of Chabad Lubavitch present in at very close uh, relation with the ruling parties. Like Putin has his, Trump has his. They're all connected to this sort of Hasidic Chabad style of Judaism, of like Tanya based kind of racial superiority ideology, which is like obviously meant for the ruling elites. Yeah. And anyway, and they all agree on, for example, on vaccinations. Enough said on that. One has to just know about microzyme theory of Antoine Béchamp versus virus theory of Louis Pasteur, and everything is clear what's what. They agree on like bold space Earth exploration, which is another like hogwash, and money laundering scheme. They provide you with CGI images in return for billions of dollars of funding this fake programs. That is not to say that there's no high altitude sort of orbital kind of stations and like helium balloons and whatnot, and what but they are, but their sky's the limit literally. You can only go so far high before you're like stopped by a very firm barrier, which is made by the way of metal oxygen. It gets cooler farther down away from the sun you get. The oxygen freezes, and it freezes into the bubble. Yeah, that's a metal oxygen. I think it's freezes under minus 320 Celsius, something like that. So before that, it becomes liquid high oxygen, and it becomes gas high oxygen. Where it's warm enough. Anyway, so like, and that whole thing is actually moving along an even bigger circle. That's called like sort of processional cycle, which takes about whatever 26,000 years to complete. So-called processional procession of equinoxes, or the great year, or whatever. So, but that's another story. So the climate is always changing because the whole thing is slowly moving. It's gonna motion of the North Magnetic Pole. It's moving at the speed of about 12 to 34 miles in a year. And so one part of Antarctic, Antarctic ring, the ice wall, one part of it is melting as the whole thing is slowly moving, and the other one is freezing. Because the sun and the moon move around that North Pole, magnetic north, yeah. we'll leave it for another day. The geographic sort of detailing of this physical dimension. Um, so U.S. is now obviously dumping Europe. They don't see it anymore important, and at the same time, Israel too kind of is at time when its usefulness has to be redefined. Originally, it was set up by British Empire in order to protect its maritime trade, so that they needed to a presence in the Eurasian continent to create to destabilize the inland trading, so that countries would have to take a sea route instead of using land trade, like Silk Route, that what China is trying to establish, and Russia trying northeast and north south and east west passages. So so that's why Israel was there to protect the passage of oil through Suez Canal and protect British maritime routes of trade, and so all the ships were registered in London, and now that they're being registered somewhere else, they call it Shadow Fleet. Yeah, that's why Israel is launching all these attacks, and there's a greater Israel agenda, of course, on top of that. And so original Judaism was the hijack of the original American traditions and culture and identity. That's why they even have a copy of dreadlocks. There's like fake Jews that they have, and then Zionism became the hijacking of the land of Palestinians and so on, which is like before the Second World War, the First World War, the British Empire was that area was under the British mandate. So when the First World War started, the British asked Arabs to help them to fight against Ottomans. Yeah, and so they promised them, like they promised Russia Constantinople, they promised Arabs the control of that area. And of course, after all was said and done, they didn't uh, come true on their words and betrayed those Arabs. And there was Balfour Declaration signed was around then, like 1917, I think, like something around there, uh, to give that land to Rothschilds to, start the Zionist state of Israel. And of course, that was part of the British Empire. So, because the British Empire was already collapsing, it was lost India, and it's basically withdrew back into its uh, continental Europe, and decided to keep its maritime roots, and it needed presence in the West Asia in order to protect its sort of maritime trade. So that's why they decided to do that way. And then so they used those Jews who adopted Judaism, a lot of them, like Khazars and Ashkenaz and whatever, like who were not Shemites, but they became identified with that culture, and so they use them to like move them to that area. How do you do that? You start pogroms. So a lot of them were organized by the sort of Zionists, early Zionists, to uh, force sort of European Jews to like start thinking of moving into their kind of uh, into their own country, and they were also advising Hitler to start packing those Jews into the concentration camps so that they can start moving them into Palestine. And of course, they only wanted to take sort of the healthy, certain kinds of Jews, and then the rest, the refuseniks, the rejects that they didn't want, and they left to their own demise. And we all know what happened there. Uh, so, and there were Jews in the Nazi Party, they were in everywhere. There was the Jews killing Jews, so there wasn't like one side versus the other. It's more complicated than that. So there were like elites who were acting against their own sort of people and for geopolitical interests. So now, the Saudis and everyone, all these Arab sort of kingdoms, monarchies that are still around, and they all support Israel because it's their interest to control that area, uh, important hub of trade between continents, and Russia too. There's a Russian diaspora in Israel is very big, and Putin has his own Chabad advisors in Russia and whatnot, so he's very close. He's Jewish himself on his mother's side. So, and the rabbinical Jews will go by matrilineal line. Like I'm House of Levi, we go by father's line. The original Judaism was like tribal Jews goes from father to son. The mother's line wasn't how you were identified, wasn't the tribe. And then later they turned it into matrilineal Judaism. Yeah, even though genetically it has no connection to the original Jews whatsoever. Um, but again, it's a house of Judah, and there are many of those. And so Russia has its own interest keeping Israel there as like securing passage of oil and trade for that region. And China is interested in that too, and America and Europe, and so they're all interested. They all have some kind of invested interest in Israel being there. That's why you don't see much outcry from any of those countries about like what's happening to Palestine, except like some basic kind of lip service. And there's nothing is being done, or it's being widely ignored to what's been happening there since the formation of Israel, which is genocide of the local population. Well, those Arabs, a lot of them came during the time when the British controlled that area. It was under British mandate. So as I said, about like 18th century, that area was very like sparsely populated. There was like all these wars in between. They like deforested large areas. There was no trees, no passing armies. They destroyed everything. All of them. So it was just deserts, rolling deserts. I was there in the winter a few years ago, and it was really hot, and in the summer it's like crazy hot. So like, yeah, I couldn't do it. But anyway, so during that time, a lot of Arabs came from all over the place. From Egypt, Saudi Arabia, whatever, like nearby. Jordan and whatnot, and came and settled there and worked for British companies and whatnot. And then and they were like local as well, like dark-skinned Palestinians as well, the actual Jews who remained from like times immemorial. And ironically, like the both the Arabs and the so-called New Jews, they're basically discriminated against us, like black Palestinians who were pushed into the a neighborhood called Slaves Neighborhood. That's my understanding of the situation there, and that's where they're basically been marginalized by both sides. So, but that said, the Palestinians definitely have their own right for self-determination and territorial integrity, and it was part of the United Nations resolution and whatever. So, two-state solution obviously it's been promised to them, but like in theory, in practice, it's impossible. You can have either one or another. You cannot have both because you have like Gaza Strip here, like West Bank here, and like it's just patchwork. Is You cannot defend it that way militarily, and you cannot. It's a recipe for perpetual war in the region, basically. Uh, which is by designs being set up that way, so that's like you have like largest open air sort of concentration camp, and where the people cannot leave easily from or return to, for that matter. And uh, and most of Israel's cities is supposedly like working for military industrial complex, so you have a lot of invested interest to promote continue wars, and you have like Lebanon and Syria and Yemen and whatever, Iran and whatnot, like anything but to continue like military conflicts in the region, because that's what they're being paid for, and that's what the whole purpose of Israel is, really, to destabilize the region. And so yeah, I think at this point they like so the brand name of Israel is kind of tainted, and so I don't know how they're gonna deal with it in terms of like their stance with the world. They've been extensively, exceedingly exercised by other nations, and like Sean, nobody wants to deal with them much. Uh, and America's oil production is increasing, so they became less dependent on what's happening in West Asia. So and they're parting away from Britain, and so and American population is also growing increasingly, sort of anti-Israel or pro-Palestinian. So was the recent developments, yeah. So will Israel survive? I think like yes, it will survive one way or another. But it may not be at the same spot. Maybe it will be moved somewhere. You never know. You know, maybe it makes more sense to have that whole region turn into the state of Palestine, which will appease everybody, but it will be kind of state that is controlled by maritime admiralty law and central banks and U.S. whatever corporations and whatnot, and like so it's like different branding, but at the essence it will be still controlled by the same people. with a pretense of like freedom and liberty, as most Western countries have. They have this pretense of a nation, but ultimately it's a corporation that with its citizens as its employees and collateral assets against whom the borrowing is done, and whose incomes are taxed. Uh, anyway, like to pay on the interest of the loans that they could have done without if they had their own control of their own central banks and could have issued interest-free loans to their government without any incurring debt. Anyway, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. So yeah, there will be probably increasing tensions in West Asia in the next year, and if the nuclear war will happen, which they plan for 2028, I hear, it will probably start in Israel or between Israel and Iran. That will be my suspicion, and they'll try to bring in Pakistan on the side of Iran, and then who knows what happens, after, and then because their part of their plan is to, for some of those factions, is to create a global reset, like Carl Schwab and all those guys. They created underground, luxurious underground cities, bankers that can sustain life for at least like quarter of a century. And so like white marble and luxurious like hotels and whatever feeders and shopping malls and whatever. It's all underground in Alaska and other places, but mainly in Alaska. There's a lot of been development. When Russian Tsars sold Alaska supposedly for nothing, there was actually two deals. The one that publicly they were declared, and then the privately that was sold to Rothschilds and their friends made deal with the under the North Star Consortium. North Star Consortium that owns Alaska and then been developing these underground cities there for the ruling elites to hide during their if there's World War III, like nuclear exchange. So so that's obviously still an option for them, and since they're losing, the globalists, that is the war to take over Russia and then break it down to pieces and then recapitalize their banks with it. They need something else. So, and that could be the World War III or Great Reset, what they say. So we'll see which way it's gonna go. There's some forces within the global elites that don't want the global reset. They want sort of gradual sort of consolidation of power and introducing digital IDs and all that stuff and social credit scores and whatnot and global surveillance and anyways. So AI is being developed as that next government who the elections will stop and there'll be just AI as a permanent government. That's sort of that idea there. Uh, well, then you have Venezuela situation in Central America. That's interesting too. It's obviously Trump's playing both sides, but as I said, he's nationalist camp, so he's been playing with globalists so long as they had a chance of victory, but now he knows they don't, so they're creating their own scenarios and new security policy for the United States, sort of indicates those developments. Not, it's not as radical as many people think. They still have a back door for the global dominance, but meanwhile, they just want to focus on things that they can actually focus on. The Venezuela, it's strange because, like, I hear that Maduro, during Biden administration, it seems like was pressured to make deal with CIA, and he was basically asked to open his prisons to release all his prison population to U.S. The Democrats wanted sort of create an unstable situation for incoming Trump administration that way, and overall their ideas of like exterminating kind of national identity and just creating this hodgepodge of people who are just bound together by money making kind of egocentric selfish agendas than some kind of binding cultural identity or it's kind of nation like civilization state, so to speak, which doesn't bode well to their interests. But anyway, the supposedly that there are in Venezuela there are computer systems that are responsible for or the company that produces the voting machines that are used in U.S. and they supposedly have some kind of database there that contains all sorts of juicy details and so on. So Trump, again, those are just wild speculations I sort of try deduce from various political analysts I've been listening to. Trump wants some dirt on his opponents in U.S. You know, with his Russia Gate and all this stuff and all his like. So he wants some uh, ammunition from Maduro to get him access to those data servers and whatnot. And hence he started to, his ballroom. It's the data center that you're digging, Oracle and whatnot. They're digging underneath the that area. So the ballroom is just like lead. So again, uh, and that's why he goes tries to get Maduro to because he doesn't want oil, he doesn't want resort because Maduro offered him oil. You want it? No, I don't want it. So he wants something else. Yeah, Maduro even offered him, "I will leave, just protect my people and like let me go." And he's like, "No, no, no." So he wants something else. He wants information. He wants Maduro to do something. So he wants Maduro to betray CIA, basically. Maduro probably knows if he does that, CIA will get him. That's my understanding. Um, and of course, China, Russia,